my channel. I'm so glad you stopped by today because today we're going to do a simple tutorial showing you guys how I make my dragon's feet. Now I roughly go over this in all my videos that I make dragons, but I never really show you the details of how to make the wire frame that goes inside of the foot. And so I'm going to explain how to put the wire frames together that go inside of the clay feet. I'm going to show you the sculpting, and then we're also going to do the painting. So I'm going to show you the whole process of making a pair of feet for your dragon. So since we're going to be doing the whole process of making the feet, you'll need quite a bit of art supplies for this. So of course you're going to need the wires. I'm going to be using a 16 gauge and a 20 gauge. You'll need some paper and something to draw with, that way we can design our wire frame. You'll need some way of measuring the lines that you drew out, so I have a ruler and then a tape measure. And then you'll need a way of cutting and bending your wires. After that, you'll need clay, sculpting tools, and of course some paint, and I don't have them down here, but some paint brushes. So this is the head of the dragon that I'm going to be making feet for. I haven't made a body pattern yet, but I'm going to use this to kind of get an idea of the size of feet that I want. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to figure out how large the leg of our dragon is going to be. So I know our head is this large, and I'm going to kind of judge that and figure out how long the leg would be. So I'm going to start with kind of where the shoulder blade would be and go down from there to get an idea of what the leg would be. Now I'm going to be doing the front leg first, and then I'll do the back. So I think that's a pretty good size. So now I'm going to start figuring out the layout of the foot. Once we have the basic shape figured out, what we're going to do now is we're going to figure out where the wires are going to go inside of this. So this is pretty simple. You just need to draw out some lines filling inside of here. Kind of think of it as you drew the leg and now you're drawing the bones. So obviously we need a wire here that's going to be straight, and then it's going to go down like this and out like that into the toes. So that will give us a rough idea of the size of foot. Now because this dragon is going to be kind of small, I'm not going to give him 4 toes for the feet. I'm probably just going to do 3. So this is the side profile. Now to figure out what the front of the foot looks like, we're going to kind of do the same thing. I'm using this as a guide, and we're going to use these lines to figure that out. So the middle toe will have a wire that starts at the toe and works all the way up the leg to this point. And this is so you have extra security and things don't wiggle around. So the next wire is going to kind of loop. It's going to be one solid wire for the next 2 toes. It's going to bend here and it's going to go down, and you're going to bend it outwards to make the other claws. And then roughly around here is where we're going to wrap these together with our thinner gauge wire. So the back leg is going to have more of a thicker thigh area. And then it's going to go kind of like this and down like that, and then the foot's going to go here. I kind of overlapped, but that's okay. Now like this one, we want our wire to go up into the leg for security when we add it to the wire frame. So that is going to be right around here. We're going to start our wire frame for our foot here. It's going to go down, and then it's going to go into the toe area. So this would probably be exactly the same as this one, except we're going to add the wire length here. So we're going to add that, and we can actually use the same measurements to make both wire frames for the front and back, just changing it up slightly. Okay, so we have a basic sketch for our wire frame. Now we need to figure out what the measurements of all of these are. So it's easier to use a tape measure. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure out, I'm going to use this one first, but I'll double check with these to make sure that it lines up. But you'll want to measure the middle toe, and this is going to be, for the back leg it's going to be 8, and then for the front leg it's going to be about 5.5. Now we need the measurement for the outer toes. These are going to be 1 wire. So you can take your measurement of 1, and that's going to be 5, so we're going to double that for this wire. So you're going to need 10 inches. So we're going to need 2 wires that are cut at 5.5 inches, 2 wires that are cut at 8 inches, and then we're going to need 4 wires that are cut at 10 inches. That way we can make 2 front feet and 2 back feet. Another benefit of using a tape measure instead of a ruler is that it's a lot easier to measure our wire, because everything is usually curved, and it's going to be really hard to measure this with something straight. So something that's kind of more bendable, it's going to be a lot easier. So normally how I measure my wire is I take the very tip and I put that along that, and then I just kind of go down the length of the wire until I get to the mark where I need. So I need 10 inches, and I'm going to take that and I'm going to cut it right there. Now, what you could also do, because we need multiples of the same number, instead of measuring the tape measure again, I'm just going to measure the wire that I cut. Now, I do realize that this specific way of making your wire frame only works for if you want a 3-toed dragon. But if you want a 4-toed dragon, it's pretty simple to change it up. All you have to do, instead of having one wire for the middle toe, you're going to do the same thing that you're doing on the outer toes with the inner toes. So you're just going to have 2 sets of bent wires. Okay, so I have my wires cut. I've got my 10s, my 8s, and my 5.5s. So I'm going to start with my 10s. I'm going to take 2 of them, and we're going to do the front feet first, and then we'll do the back. So what we're going to do first is we're going to bend these in half. So we're just trying to find the very middle and just bend it as best we can. If you don't get it perfect, you can always adjust the ends of the wire and just cut it off. And the reason I like bending these together is that way they match as closely as they can. Since we are making a pair, we want them to be very similar. So those are our middle toes. And then we're going to take our 5.5s and our pattern. And what we're going to do is we're going to bend our 5.5 wires to match these lines. Okay, and then you have something roughly like that. Now we're going to take our bent pieces too, and we're going to be bending them following this as well. So you'll want to have it going like this, not like this. That way each toe bends separately. So we're going to bend here. Okay, now we're going to take our 20 gauge wire and we're going to cut a piece. We don't need too much, so I'm just going to cut about that much for it. And then I'm going to cut another piece roughly the same length for the other foot, and we're going to add all of our wires together. So I'm going to twist that on in place, and then I'm going to take our middle toe and I'm going to put this between the 2 wires, kind of like that. And then I'm going to hold it down here and try and keep them together as best I can, and we're going to start wrapping. Okay, so I'm going to leave a little bit, and then I'm going to take the outer toes and I'm going to bend them out and figure out how far I want them to be. And then I'm going to take the rest of my wire and I'm going to lace it through these wires. And this will help keep these wires a little bit more separate. And now that we have the wire frames done, we can start sculpting the feet. Okay, so the first bit of clay that we need to do is we need to add a lump right here where all of our wires are combined, and this is just going to help secure everything while we work on the rest of the foot. Now, I highly recommend, if you're going to make all your feet at once, to measure out your clay so everything is roughly about the same size. So like all of these I made ahead of time, and they're going to be the same size for each foot. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some claws. So just like that, I have these measured out to the size that I want the claws, and we're going to put those at the tip of the wire after kind of making them into tiny cones. Just like that. And then we're going to do this to the rest of our feet, and then we're going to want to do a pre-bake of this. That way this will actually help hold everything into place. Once it's baked, it'll keep everything still, and then you can work on your toes. So I'm going to pre-bake this. Normally I do 275 Fahrenheit for about like 20 minutes. Okay, our pre-bake is done, and now we need to start working on the under portion of the toes, and with the back legs we're going to add some to the back of the foot. So, like everything else, I pre-cut everything to fit, and the toes for the back feet are shorter than the front feet, so I have different lengths over here. And I'm just taking the strip, laying it out on the bottom of the wire, and then pushing it on. And push it on nice and flat. And then I'm going to kind of pinch and pull down, or more up since that's the top of the foot, but we're looking down at it. And just kind of have it wrap around the wire. Once we have all of our toes covered, if you want, you could add more clay to the back of this, or you can do like I'm going to do, and I'm just going to blend it into the clay that's already there. So I already like the shape of it, and I don't want to add any more clay. So I'm just lightly blending it into the already baked clay. So I'm just going to take another tool and I'm going to mark out where the creases of the toe is going to be on all the toes. So usually I like doing 2 of them. I'll do that, and then if I want to wrap the wrinkle or curve around, I'll go around like the side and kind of define it. And then that obviously is just a single wrinkle. You could kind of go in and add extra lines to make it look a little bit more realistic and not so flat. Okay, so I got all of the bottoms of the toes done on all of the feet, and these are the back legs, and I'm just going to take a strip of clay and cover up this portion right here. So I'm going to take that and kind of do the same thing that I did with the toes and wrap around a bit, and then I'm going to blend it into the rest of the foot. And then once you have the bottoms of the feet all done, you can do another pre-bake. If you want, just do it the same time and temp as the previous one, 275 Fahrenheit for about 20 minutes. Once your clay feet have finished baking for the second time, they're nice and cool to the touch, we can then start working on the tops of the feet and finishing them up. So for this, I've cut a bunch of tiny little cuts of clay. They're roughly all about the same size. All I did was I rolled out a long strip of it and I just kept cutting until I had all these tiny little pieces. And then I also made some slightly larger ones for more up here. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to start on the outer toes. We're going to roll these so there's no sharp edges, and we're going to start layering them on the tops of the feet. And this is how I normally make scales. There's ways of adding extra detail to this or doing it slightly different, but I really like this as a simple, quick technique where you can still get a decent amount of detail to it. So I'm just going all the way up the toes, and I'm going to stop roughly about the same spot. And if you can, try to do the same number of balls of clay on each toe unless the toes are different lengths. So the outer toes are roughly the same length, so I'm going to try and do the same amount on each one. But the middle one is slightly longer, so I might have to do like one, maybe two more. Now we're going to take our larger ones and we're going to basically do the same thing but covering the tops of the feet instead of the tops of the toes. So I kind of rolled it out, I stretched it out a little bit, and I'm going to kind of like push like that, and then I'm going to also push down to get it to cover up that middle toe. So we kind of want it to round off a little bit. And if you want, you can go in and clean up these, kind of fix up the lines if you want, if you didn't do them as nice and neat as you want them, or you can even go over them and add a texture to them if you want. I normally like to do little lines and stuff, but I think I'm going to leave these the way they are. But these are all sculpted, and now we can do our final bake. So they're going to go in the oven for about 45 minutes at 275 Fahrenheit. Okay, now that we have all of our clay pieces baked, they're all nice and hard, we can start on the painting. Now obviously this is based off of preference, so if you have a different way that you'd rather paint your feet, go ahead and do it. This is just how I normally end up doing it. I usually have a main color for the body, so for this one it's going to be a kind of dark red. And I end up primering the bottoms of the feet where the scales aren't, and I just kind of go over the whole thing. And when I'm doing this, I'm not worrying about it getting anywhere else on the foot. I'm kind of okay with covering the whole foot with this one color. You don't have to, you can just paint the bottom if you want, but you could also just go over the whole entire foot. So I just kind of glob it on, get it all completely covered, try to get into all the cracks around the scales. And then once I have everything covered, I take a bigger brush, and this just kind of smooths everything out, gets rid of all the lumps of paint, and makes it more even. So I'm going to do this to all of the feet. Now the red is a little bit translucent in certain spots, so I'll probably do a second coat once this dries. And then once I have everything primered on the bottom of the feet, I'm going to move on to the scales. So I actually want to do my scales kind of a gold color. So what I'm going to actually do is find a paintbrush real quick. Is I'm going to paint it kind of a creamy color first because I want to use a metallic paint for this. And I don't want to go over and over and over again with that metallic paint. I want to just do it once. So it helps to just use kind of a more opaque color similar to what you want to use as your metallic color. And just kind of go over and primer with that. And it just makes it easier. It's going to make it where you don't have to use as many coats. Okay, and then once we have that layer completely dried, we can then go over it with our metallic paint. You want to make sure that it's completely dried because if not, they'll start muddying together and you won't get the same effect. Now granted, I might have to do like 2 coats with this, but before I probably would have had to do a lot more. And then once I have all my scales painted, I'm going to paint the claws. So for this one, I'm going to be using a black. I figured this would stand out nicely. And then once all the claws are done, we can work on a few highlights. For that, usually I just do like a few little bits of white lines here and there just to draw attention to the tips of the toes. What I normally do is I'll take just a tiny bit of white and I'll just kind of like go right there and then maybe one more scale just to bring a little bit more tension down to the toe. And now what we're going to do is we're going to resin them. And the reason I do this is to help protect the paint. It keeps the clay a little stronger than normal and it just makes them a lot more durable. The type of resin I'm using is more of a pro marine type. I switched to this because I could buy it in bulk, but it's perfectly fine if you want to use craft grade. The only thing different if you decide to use a craft grade resin is sometimes it tends to yellow. So this one is actually set up to where it won't yellow. Now if you do decide that you want to resin your clay pieces, make sure to read the instructions for that specific type that you get because not all resin mixes the same way. I like to get the 1-in-1 mixtures, which is equal parts of both containers. So it's really easy to mix these together, you just measure them out. But some are mixed based off of weight, so you put like little drops inside of a large container of another thing and that turns into resin as well. So there's different ways that you'll have to mix them depending on what type you get. But in my opinion, the 1-in-1 is pretty easy to mix because you just have to eye it and make sure to follow the little lines that you have on the cup to make sure you have the same amount on each one. And you don't even need to mix them in separate cups, so like you don't have to take 2 cups, pour them, measure them, and then mix them together. But normally how I'll mix it is I'll take maybe A, figure out where I want that to go, say 10. So if I put that at 10, that means the next measurement is 20, so I'll put this in the same container and get the measurement to 20, and then I'll just mix it up. So it's pretty easy. So I poured my resin and now I'm just going to mix it together. You want to mix it quite a bit. The kind I have requires a few minutes of it just to make sure everything is completely cohesive. So I just want to make sure that everything is nice and mixed. And normally with resin, when you're pouring it, you want to avoid bubbles, but since we're just painting it on, I'm not really worried about that right now. So I'm kind of mixing it a lot faster than you would if you were mixing it to just pour into like a mold. So I'm just gonna load my brush and I'm just gonna start brushing over the clay foot. And I wanna make sure to get into all little cracks and crevices. It doesn't matter how much you put on your brush. Usually I take big globs of it and then I just kind of spread it around. But you'll wanna cover up absolutely everything and just get it completely covered. And then once I have everything covered, I'm going to put it in something to hold it into place so that the excess resin can run off and then they can cure without being bumped or anything. So normally I just use pieces of foam that I'm willing to throw away, so I'll keep these as long as they don't look horrible, and then I just stick the metal pieces in, and then the rest of the resin that isn't needed will just kind of drip off. But when you do have these standing like this, you want to make sure that they're slightly slanted so the toes aren't like completely flat like this, because otherwise the resin will kind of pool up and make little bubbles or like bulges on the tops of the toes. So if you can't have them slightly slanted, just kind of check on them the first 2 hours that they're there and wipe away the built up resin and you should be fine. Usually after about 2 or 3 hours the resin is thick enough to where you don't have to babysit it, but it really depends on like the temperature you're working on too. So once we have our feet resined, you of course want to set them somewhere safe to dry and finish curing, and then once those have finished curing you can pop them off of the foam thing, clean up the edges a little bit, and then you'll have your feet. Sometimes it will leave a little bit of stuff stuck here, but this part's going to be inside of the doll, so you really don't have to worry too much about how that looks. But these are the front ones, and then we have the back ones. And they're very similar, like I said before. The only thing different that I do with the back ones is I make them a little longer and have the scales go more up the feet. And then this wasn't part of the tutorial, but I figured I'd show you the head because I am going to be making this into a full dragon. So I'm not sure when I'll get to that, but you'll probably see it in some of my vlogs or something like that. Anyways guys, I hope this video was helpful. I kind of want to do a more beginner type series on my channel, just kind of breaking down certain steps that are a little bit more detailed than I can show in the actual full-on tutorials. So if there's any steps to making an art doll that is just a little bit confusing because I go a little bit too fast in the tutorial and you want me to just slow down and explain it a little bit more, let me know and I can make another video and just kind of keep this series going. Because I would like to kind of break down the whole process and just have it where if you just want want to learn one specific thing, you can access that on my channel instead of having to watch tutorial after tutorial and stuff. Anyways guys, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!